Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting, because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey families and friends around the world. Welcome to a special edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by Christy Casciano-Burns. And today we have a special episode about what families and professionals should know when playing or returning to playing to hockey. And to do that, we've brought in some very special guests for you. Both of our experts here are part of NYU's Langone's team of sports health experts. Julia Drattell, program coordinator and athletic trainer at NYU Langone's Concussion Center. Athletic director is something very different, where she is responsible for advancing clinical programming, supporting ongoing research, and developing educational programs for the community and healthcare professionals. She fosters relationships and acts as a liaison for local academic institutions, youth leagues, and professional athletic leagues. Julia develops medical policies, including concussion management, at these schools and leagues. We're also joined by Dr. Guillem Gonzalez-Lomas, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Orthopedics at NYU Langone Medical Center, who specializes in sports medicine. He's published several studies related to hockey. He's also the co-medical director of the National Women's Hockey League, as well as the head team physician for the Metropolitan Riveters women's hockey team. He's recently led an effort to craft a COVID-19 return-to-play protocol for the NWHL. And Dr. Lomas grew up playing hockey in Toronto and is a lifelong Habs fan, despite always living in a highly adversarial environment. God bless you, sir, for that. He still plays hockey once a week. Thank you both so much for being with us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. No, it's our pleasure. So but before we jump into the questions and the information, and again, all the things that we're trying to bring to the parents and the families that watch this show, could you both just give us a little bit of a background on NYU's program and how it corresponds to youth sports?
Sure. Well, I can talk about the relationships we have with USA Hockey and the different youth leagues. From my perspective as the liaison, we have two groups that we work with closely in Queens and Brooklyn. And we meet with them, do recurring education events, and have helped with various policies, primarily concussion management, but also injury prevention and things like that. And we've worked with USA Hockey for a similar type of relationship where we help them just deliver education to their coaches so that they know how to manage concussion. And we also now with COVID-19 have kind of pivoted to make sure that our partners and the groups that we work with are adequately prepared.
Yeah, and I can speak just briefly to our hockey center. So we've basically set up a multidisciplinary center to treat hockey injuries, where we have everything from sports medicine physicians, exercise physiologists, physical therapists, orthopedic surgeons. So anyone that might be required for any kind of injury or concern related to hockey. Julia alluded to concussion. Obviously, that's something that's always concerning to us. With hockey, it is a contact sport, and we know concussions, they're just there. Anytime you've got a contact or collision sport, they exist. So that's an important component of it. We've got a concussion center at NYU that has really sort of been leading the charge in developing protocols for return to play throughout several sports, but we've partnered with them for hockey. So Hockey Center has been a great venture, kind of bringing a lot of specialties together, and really the kind of main focus of it for youth and adolescent hockey players.
I almost long for the days when concussions were the major concern of all of us, and still is obviously a major concern. But as of right now, and this is the reason for the show, obviously, COVID-19 is something that you've all had to pivot to immediately to create the best practices, to create the best precautions, and to make sure that we're educating people on what to do. So for our audience, the reason we brought in these two experts is mainly because there's so much information out there from different people, from different professionals in different fields, that it can be tough to know where to go. So what we wanted to do is bring together really a non-political, conversation with people in the field in hockey that are working on this on a daily basis. And that is why both of you are here with us today. So again, this show is going to be all about having a safe return and also having a really good time when you're playing hockey, if at all. So I want to jump right into what families should know about having a safe return. And the first question I have is kind of point blank, but is what should parents be telling their kids about the virus and how it pertains to sports? That's one of the big things that's out there right now, is that in order to have any conducive conversation about this, we have to have those conversations within our own homes first.
I can start, and then Julia, please, dovetail. Look, this is a really stressful time for all of us. Like you said, Lee, I mean, it's been the longest, shortest year of all of our lives. And, as an adult, it's been difficult. And I think it's been exponentially so for younger kids, just not having that perspective that a few years, under your belt gives you. And so I think along with that, I think for parents, it's very challenging to manage that. So putting aside hockey, I mean, just that, right? Just the mental health of our kids and our families is something that we've got to be sensitive to. I think there's two ways to look at it. Obviously, one is what we tell our kids, and the other thing is, as parents, what are we thinking ourselves? So to address the second one first, the really important thing to remember is we don't really have all of the information about this. And that, like you said, I mean, this is truly a completely apolitical, non-ideological statement. We just don't have all of the information. So right now, all the decisions we make are essentially probabilistic, right? So it's just like when you get on a plane, there's a risk. When you get in your car, there's a risk. And those risks are different. And we make decisions about, one thing or the other based off of that. It's no different with sports. And it's no different with sports for our kids. So if you're going to engage, in sports and get back to it, you're going to have to be weighing, all of these probabilities. So although that can feel very stressful, like, well, I don't know, what's the percentage chance that I'm going to get sick or my kid's going to get sick? In some ways, that's sort of relieving too, because it just means that, look, all you can do is do the best that you can with the knowledge you have at hand, and then go from there. So that leads into the second thing, which is, what to tell our kids. And, I think it's, this is one of those cases where I don't think you can promise anything, right? You can't say you're not going to get sick, but again, you can basically convey that same kind of baseline approach to things. And so, right off the bat, and we'll probably repeat this a few times today, but the things that we know that help to mitigate the spread of the virus, of infection, are wearing a protective barrier like a face mask and physical distancing as much as possible. And we can get into the granular details of how a hockey rink plays into all that. Right. But I think those are two things that are somewhat controllable. And those are things that parents can impart to their kids as, priorities. So look, this is what you gotta wear your mask, and you gotta try to, stay as much apart as you can, whether it's in the locker room or, in the arena from anyone else. That's going to decrease the risk of getting sick.
Question for you about masks, because I get a lot of questions from parents about masks. Is it safe to wear a mask when you're playing hockey?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most kids are playing with cages, so their heads are sort of in a relatively enclosed environment. So, the risk of the mask getting caught on something is somewhat low. It is a loose-fitting mask is probably something that's doable. I think it's safe. I think that, again, the devil's in the details, so it really depends on what kind of mask. I think if you wear something like an N95 or a KN95 that are completely occlusive, I mean, that's their goal, right? To prevent any sort of air, non-filtered air from being breathed. I think that's probably not advisable if you're doing, you're exerting yourself, doing a sport. But generally a cloth mask, a fairly loose-fitting cloth mask, or one of those loose-fitting surgical masks should be okay.
It's an interesting proposition because, like we spoke about before the show, I have a younger son in the game. He's only 6 years old. And it was funny because we were talking in the locker room, not in the locker room, the area we were getting dressed because we can't be in locker rooms, about how our children actually have never known a locker room because they have all just started playing. And this is the reality that they started playing in. So it's been somewhat easy to mold my son's understanding of, hey, we wear a mask when we go to the rink and we get dressed at home because he doesn't know any different. I think about, though, those middle school age kids and those high school age kids that may feel invincible in a lot of ways and that this virus is not going to affect me. That's the parent that I think of a lot when I think about the kind of conversations that need to be had. And I guess it's just kind of down to each individual parent. But again, bringing the science that you just said of this is why it's important to have a face barrier. This is why it's important to socially distance. Julia, I wanted to throw it to you. Did you have anything to add to that before we move on? Yeah.
So I think what I've learned from doing educational interventions with kids for health promotion is they really, unfortunately, especially in that middle school, high school age group, they need a why. You can't just say, you're going to do this because I said so. Right. That just doesn't work in this generation. So you need to really make sure they understand, like, why are we socially distant? Why are we wearing the mask? It has this benefit, that benefit. And, if you have permitted your child to play sports, we were talking about risk of, getting on a plane last year has its risks, right? There's safety involved. So you've performed kind of a risk analysis, who's high risk in your family, those kind of things. So you need to explain kind of your rationale and make sure that they understand why they're being asked to do things. And I think that, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your friends. We were all locked down all spring. Rinks were shut down throughout the Northeast, at least. So explaining to them that you're going to wear this mask and you're going to do the social distancing and everything that we need to do so that that doesn't happen again. And letting them know that, like, this is a privilege. We've kind of started to figure this out. So, baby steps, right? But let's make sure our community isn't going backwards.
Right. And I think that's a great point, Julia, because I've always found with my kids when they were younger, if you explain that to them, you give them a reason, and then put it in a way that you explain to them that you're doing your part. You're going to make a difference. Right. You're going to be like a little superhero by helping your friends out and helping out mom and dad. That take that responsibility and you can actually empower them, and then they're going to want to do it.
And another jump on that too is, I do a lot of work with team building and team bonding. Another great why, especially in that age, is you're protecting your teammates. You're protecting your team. So, and again, I know people have various thoughts on what mask wearing in general, but the idea being is that if a member on your team feels safer, the whole team should be buying into that concept just on that idea alone. Keeping in mind too, and I do feel like we need to say this, and I would like you two to confirm this, that mask wearing is not just to prevent you from getting the disease. It's to prevent people with the disease, or maybe they're asymptomatic, from putting it out there to other people. It's a two-way street. It's not just about the person wearing the mask. That is correct, right? I'm not.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. I mean, it is a complete symbiotic exercise. And what could be more team building than that, right? I mean, we use so many sports analogies when we're trying to describe, teams working together, where it's, whether it's 8 guys on a crew boat, or a hockey team. And you're absolutely right. It's a small step that can prevent potentially the whole team from having to stop playing. So the stakes are high, and but the ability to try at least to prevent that, it's a small step.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things about sport is that you learn how to think beyond yourself. Right. It's not about what you want and I want to score this goal. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to pass the puck because he or she will have a better chance of actually getting the puck in, right? So it's learning about that, doing something for the greater good, and really framing it in that way is you're protecting your team. And again, like maybe one of your teammates has a high-risk family member at home. So that's even one more layer of protecting your team.
Right. And your family's a team too. Like, and you're alluding to this, Julia. I always say to the team, it's we over me. right? In a team environment. And again, look, we're a selfish people. And I always tell people selfishness is not always a bad thing. If I want to be with my kids other than doing my work, that's a form of selfishness. It's just, we've kind of vilified the word, but it's an asset, and it's also a detrimental thing sometimes. But when a team environment, I think mask wearing is very important. So I think we've hammered that home enough. Hopefully people at home are listening
Right.
to that. I do want to get into some more of the logistical challenges that families face. The one at the top of my mind is just locker room access. Now, depending on where you are, what state you're in, what the regulations are, I've been to rinks that the locker rooms are completely closed. You cannot even get dressed in the rink outside putting your skates on. I've been in rinks where everything seems to be almost operating as normal with socially distanced behavior. Where do you two stand? And Dr. Lomas, I'll start with you on locker room access or getting dressed at home. What are the best practices? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so this is obviously also a very loaded topic, and it's very difficult to just, cast a widespread opinion, because it will differ depending
Absolutely.
on, regional issues and infection rates and so on. I think it just boils down, and I kind of said that at the beginning, right? We're going to be getting back to these two issues over and over again, but certainly the physical distancing part of it is critical. We definitely know that closed environments, even though now it appears that the virus may not live for that long on surfaces, just sharing enclosed air can put people at risk, even though we can be as diligent as possible as we think we're being with mask wearing or protective barriers. The reality is it comes off once in a while, whatever, you gotta rub your nose. I mean, it's just normal human behavior. So really limiting the density in locker rooms is ideal. As far as having the kids getting dressed at home and, like kind of mite level hockey practices where they just, drop them off at the rink and pick them up, without having to get changed. That is certainly a consideration. And I would say, if parents and teams are in areas where there does seem to be a surge and arenas are still open, that's probably best practice in those places. I think that the thing that you can do to limit exposure the most, even if it's overkill, and that's something that we've done. Julie and I both worked on this protocol for the NWHL. And that's something that we decided early on when we were devising it. We're going to decant on the side of being conservative. Because the thing is, we don't know. I mean, maybe it turns out that things aren't as bad as we thought, but maybe the opposite happens. And the last thing we want is to have, a big spread within a team or within even within a league. There's a recent CDC article. This is somewhat anecdotal, but talking about a hockey led to, you guys may be familiar with this one, led to 15 out of 21 players getting infected.
Right.
So again, look, I have been playing every week with the same guys and no one's gotten infected. So I don't put a ton of weight on anecdotal evidence, but it's there. It's a possibility. So to answer your question, it depends.
That's a fair answer.
Dr. Love, I have a question about locker rooms. Now, our local rink just reopened the locker rooms, but they're keeping the door open to help with ventilation. Does it make a difference? Do you think that's a good idea? And they're also limiting the number of kids in there.
I think the number of kids probably has a more significant effect than so sometimes with this sort of stuff, we get into the voodoo part of it and the wishful thinking. I mean, to some extent, we see this with outdoor restaurants, right? Where, now we're seeing in the winter restaurants with essentially enclosed areas outside with, maybe a small portion open to the environment being classified as outdoor seating areas. I mean, whether or not that's actually significant in mitigating the risk of spread, it's unclear. But we want to make sure we stick with the stuff that we know. And certainly decreasing density in a locker room is probably the most important thing that we can do to, affect and mitigate spread.
All right. I have another question about.
No worries. This is a live podcasting. This is what I love about the
I
world.
have so many. This is so great. I'm so glad both of you are here because rinks are all over the place, especially with allowing parents in. Some rinks only allow one parent in, which, okay, I get that. But then they're setting up big screen TVs in the parking lots or allowing parents to look through a window. And if you look out in the parking lot, now you've got parents congregated around those big screen TVs, shoulder to shoulder, whereas the rink has 3,000 that can sit. It would make more sense, and I don't know, I'm not an expert, but to me, wouldn't it make more sense to spread out in the rink rather than having parents huddle around TV sets out in the parking lot? And I get that you want to reduce density, but what's the best practice here?
Well,
Christine, go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I think honestly that the airflow is so important. So it's in the locker room, like not be using the locker room. The harm versus the benefit, I would close locker rooms, and that's my opinion. And if you are using them, I think door open, again, it's one more small ask. We've all been in a locker room. We know that they smell, and that's because the air is stale in there. So, door open, maybe having a fan just to kind of circulate air and get it pushed out that door. But the rink is an enclosed space, right? So the air doesn't get to circulate the way that it does outside. And you have people coming in and out all day. You also have assume like one or two entrances and exits. So you have people really close together there as practice is beginning and ending. So it's also about flowing in and out of the building, and just being outside, you have the air be able to disperse around you, although obviously you would want to maintain those 6 feet. So I think, again, like the small asks, outside is better than inside, distant is better than close together. So it's all kind of like pluses and minuses. But one part that I think people ignore is to and from the exits and entrances, and also using the back room just for the general population, not the locker room. And also limiting that. So if people are outside, they're less likely to just like go, to a potentially crowded area.
One thing I do want to bring light to in response to all of this is something that Dr. Lomas, you said this, and Julia, you said this too. And I'm a physician advocate in the sense of, you said multiple times, we do not have all the answers. There are times we don't know. And I think that a lot of people out there are just expecting, you should know this. And the truth is, first off, I think it takes a lot of guts. And I think it's a compliment to you that you're willing to say, hey, I don't have the answers, because I think that's the right thing to do here, to tell a lot of people, we don't know everything about the coronavirus. And if you look back all the way to March, we've had different guidance at different times when cases are up, when cases are down. So this is a very living, fluid environment. And Julia, to your point, the regulations in the rink, outside the rink, they're going to change based on your state, based on how many people are testing positive for the virus, based on the information that they have in that arena. And then it comes down to even different things like different businesses. Some rinks are privately owned. Some rinks are municipalities, one of my favorite words to try and pop out there. Right. So, and again, I think it's a key point here is that, and again, this is not a negative thing that a physician and an athletic trainer are saying, hey, look, we don't have all the answers to that. I think that's an asset for the listener, for the viewer of this show, is to not go into it like, why don't I have a magic button that I can press and we know everything? And it will continue to change as we head into hockey season, which also happens to be cold and flu season, right? So I wanted to give you guys a chance to talk about that as well, because I think it's important for people to understand that physicians are doing everything they possibly can here within their power, but it does not mean they're going to come up with a perfect solution for every scenario and every situation.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think, look, we're all vulnerable to this sort of bias, right? I mean,
right.
When we, to use the airline, the flying analogy, we expect safety. We expect to have our flight leave on time. It really bothers us when it doesn't,
Right.
and to think about the complexity of that whole thing, right? Transporting 250 people, 3,000 miles or whatever the case may be,
right.
And doing it like to the minute. And so, I mean, look, we're very fortunate to be living in a society that just has the resources and the organization to create to meet our expectations.
Right.
But like you said, this is different than anything we've ever encountered in our lifetimes. I mean, this is, the epidemiologists talk about 1 in 100 years type pandemic that really spreads globally and also is contagious and, and lethal enough to be really worrisome. I think getting back to what we were talking about earlier, and Julie alluded to it, this is a case where we sort of have to shoulder some of the responsibility and not necessarily expect that all the right answers are going to be out there for us. And we're the passive recipients of them. So take the responsibility to make sure that the team is as safe as possible, regardless of what the rink regulations or the state or local regulations are. You take the responsibility to make sure that we limit the spread, because if a bunch of kids on the team get sick, whether or not that illness ends up being significant, the team's going to stop playing. I mean, that's the most likely scenario. And if a few teams get sick, the league will shut down. I mean, that's the reality. So regardless of what you think, and we all have different opinions, but regardless of what you think, do the most conservative thing to try to mitigate the spread of it. Right. And so again, if that's having a kid dress at home, that it might have to be that way. This isn't forever. It's not forever. That is one thing we can bank on. I mean, whether it's a year or 2 years, you can expect that in 2022, things will be much closer to normal. So it is really uncomfortable. It's very onerous. And I'm personally very sensitive to that, for the players, the parents, everybody involved. But it's just, we all have to kind of shoulder part of it and get through it. And in the end, it'll be in our rearview mirror, and we'll be better for it.
Right. It is a buffet of uncertainty this season. We get that. There are some things that we can control. It's really important for a kid to get a flu shot because the coronavirus symptoms mirror the flu symptoms.
Or without coronavirus, it's important.
Right. Exactly. Now, let me ask you this, and this has come up a couple of times. Let's say your kid has a runny nose. Hockey practices tonight. Mom, I feel fine. I just have a runny nose. Do you keep the kid home?
Yeah, I mean, now you're asking the hardball questions.
That's what we do here on Our Kids Play Hockey.
You know what?
It's the hardball
because some parents are going to say, no, I'm going to keep you home. Let's make sure you're okay. Let's see if you have any other symptoms. And other parents will say, oh, it's just a runny nose. Let's go. And then it turns out that the child may have asymptomatic COVID.
That's right, or minimally symptomatic COVID. When we for our protocol for the NWHL, these are obviously older players. They're post college, but part of the screening that we do before every practice is, and this will be done before every game, is they have to answer a question about whether or not they have symptoms that are cold-like. The answer here, in my opinion, is an absolute. You don't take the kid to practice. Those are symptoms. Those are symptoms of a cold. Coronavirus is a cold. Really, it's a cold on steroids. And we know that kids tend to have mild symptoms in general. So that's one where, and I do think that this is where parents can communicate with the league, and because big question comes up, especially at the elite levels. Well, I don't want my kid to maybe miss out on being part of a select team or getting picked for a team because they're doing we're doing our due diligence. We're being responsible. So I think that they have to establish that with the league so that no kid gets punished because they miss a game or practice because there's even a possibility that they might be sick.
Right.
And so that's again something that we can control, right? That's something, and maybe that puts some families at ease that they're not going to miss an opportunity, to have their kids showcased because of the pandemic.
Yeah, Dr. Lomas, I think that's a
great point.
Answer. Yeah. And Christie, I'm with you. Like I empathize with all the questions you're asking. Even I've been in an arena and thought, like, why are we not sitting in here? This place is gigantic and so much uncertainty. And
it just seems counterproductive that you've got these parents huddled out in the parking lot, shoulder to shoulder, watching on these big screens, and you've got an empty arena that can seat 3,000 and only one parent allowed.
And just to give some even more context, Dr. Lomas and Julia, to what you're talking about, and without naming any organizations, in my local area, my organization has everything in place that you just said, which is temperature checks when you walk in the building. We have to fill out a form every single time we are to appear at the rink. We've all, as parents, said to each other, again, my kid's on the younger side, so we're not dealing with select teams just yet, but if your kid feels in any way sick or you feel in any way sick, just stay home. Now, another local organization has just been on probation for 2 weeks because they had no precautions in place, and a coach and player showed up to a game after testing positive for coronavirus, which is almost unthinkable, but it shows you that this will happen. When you deal with a human element, this will happen. So I think one thing I want to kind of just organize here in terms of thoughts, because we are trying to provide, and we are, answers for everybody, is that I think there is a lot of individual accountability here that we need to speak about. While all the parents, all the players, all the coaches, we're all looking for guidance. At the end of the day, if it's a situation, Christy, you just said it, my kid has a runny nose. As a parent, I have to make that call to tell my son or daughter, look, because of what's going on in the world, this is the reality, we're not going. We wouldn't want to give your teammates a cold anyway.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to follow these precautions. And I have to say this. I know, look, I've played hockey at an elite level. I've coached at an elite level. And now I'm a parent in the game. I know that pulling feeling when it's a big game or it feels like it really matters. And I would just suggest, this is me speaking as a coach and an administrator, you take a step back and really look at your priorities. You could literally be putting someone else's family's life in danger for a game. And I just personally, I don't believe that to be worth it at this point. You saw the precautions the NHL took to keep people away from their own families. You see the precautions the NWHL is taking, the college leagues are taking. I think it's just very important to mention that there's a personal accountability on all of us. And this goes beyond hockey, obviously, just to kind of think, okay, where do I stand with this? Is it potential that I might accidentally spread something? Now, switching gears a little bit here, I do want to ask Julia this question. I was watching another presentation you were doing with on football, and you spoke a lot about, hey, look, just get your kids outside and get them moving. So in the hockey realm, I wanted to say that there are a lot of alternatives to being on the ice with practicing as a team or even individually. Is getting outside to play hockey, hopefully the weather is not horrendous, but that is a really healthy alternative for just being in the rink at any time, correct?
Again, yeah, it's all about airflow. So
Right.
Outside, if you can do it, it's better. One of my favorite examples, and this was just a space issue, but I worked a lot with wrestling, and a gym didn't have enough space for all of the mats, so we just moved two into the parking lot.
Right.
And the wrestlers just wrestled outside. And it was fine. It was just another match. And that kind of also translates to hockey. I mean, if there's a pond, what could be more fun than that?
Right.
But also if there's a roller or something like that. And then there's an infinite number of things that hockey players can do just in dry land practice.
Right.
And even moving one of your practices to a virtual team lifting session, or just providing them some sort of strength training regimen. There's so many different variations that you can do. And I think also having to be creative can make the game more fun. Obviously, it's a logistical, sometimes nightmare for the coaches to have to really rethink how you approach the season. But I mean, you can make it fun.
Right.
Right. And even on the college level, my daughter plays college hockey. They've been practicing pretty regularly, but in small quads with the kids that they live with or are around all the time. So they had to think creatively, and they've been able to get out on the ice. We don't know what kind of season we're going to have. They're saying possibly a January startup. We're hoping for that. But as you said, Dr. Lomas, it's up in the air. We don't know. There's so much uncertainty here. But at least for now, that they're able to control the situation and keep the kids healthy, they're on the ice and they're practicing. And they love it. And they're not even complaining.
And that's what we've heard too with Dr. Lomas and the NWHL is, it's just one extra hurdle of having to do the temperature screen and the symptoms. And, we're trying to encourage them to not travel and go out to eat and all of those things. And it's, it's an ask, but what we've heard is that the athletes are just so excited to be back on the ice. So it's those little things that you just do for the sake of the team for a short amount of time so that everyone has the benefit of playing.
Yeah, and Christy, just to kind of, you were essentially describing this, but the way that we've termed it sort of alliteratively is bubble without a bubble. So just, the pros have the resources to actually house, the players in hotels and really separate them. Obviously, most leagues can't do that, but you can do your best to kind of create a virtual bubble, right? So limit the number of contacts you have outside of the rink. Just do your due diligence during the day. And now that obviously gets tough with school. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. And that's going to differ depending on where somebody is. But just having that as a mindset, like I'm trying to protect myself and my teammates. Right. And every decision I make, I'm trying to just decrease the risk. So over thousands and tens of thousands and millions of little interactions, right? That really adds up. That adds up to decreasing the risk quite a bit.
I was going to say too, just echoing Julia, what you said about being outside. And these are great points all around, is that for all you rough and tough parents out there that we're talking about walking up the hill both ways to school and having to brave the elements when you were a teenager and the below freezing temperatures, this is your chance to tell your kids to get off the Nintendo and go outside and brave those elements and learn how to be a kid again. But these are all phenomenal thoughts. I do want to transition here also. We've been talking a lot about families. I do want to talk about professionals in rinks in general as well, because I know we have people listening that do that, but I think it's also very important for parents to kind of know what these places should be doing to make sure that it's a safe environment for their kids. So it's okay to repeat yourself here. But what are some of the basic, in your opinion, some of the basic steps organizations, by organizations, I mean rinks or team organizations, should be taking right now to make sure it's a safe environment? And again, this can be very broad, but in your opinion, I'll start with you, Dr. Lomas, just what are the basic things that everybody should be doing right now to make sure it's a safe environment?
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit some of these points earlier, but limiting the population density in a rink, that's really important. And sometimes, again, these are just very normal human kind of, you might want to call them errors in judgment, but it's just very normal to say, hey, look, we're going to go all out with certain restrictions for players, but then we don't really think about what we're doing around the snack bar. Right. So, and then you have the situation that Christy described outside. I mean, I've heard stories like that where, the players have a strict plan of action. They're in ventilated locker rooms, no more than, 6 to 10 kids per locker room. But then there's 30 parents huddled around the snack bar. So what's that doing? So I think just really kind of looking at the entire I guess the dynamic of a practice or of a game. So that includes from beginning to end. Julia had mentioned, the entrance and exits, just making sure that, there is some kind of monitoring, and that can be difficult to do, but that's definitely important. So I think that's one thing. I also think being fairly strict with, regulations. So as far as mask wearing are, I mean, don't have to have police there, but maybe someone to remind, people. Obviously this does require buy-in from parents and people who work at the rink, but I do think that just having somebody there to, remind people if they just forget. It happens, sometimes you see someone you haven't seen in a long time. Hey, I want you to see who I am. Mask comes off. So little things like that can go a long way. We want to keep it positive. There's nothing here that should be punitive, but I think those are two things that can kind of help outside of the hockey, and the player-specific regulations.
Right. And how diligent should parents be now with washing the gear and keeping everything sanitized?
Great question.
Julia, you want to take that?
That's a really good one. Well, actually, to go back really quick to the previous question, something occurred to me in the middle of what Dr. Lomas was saying with the screens in the parking lot. Can they put that feed online? And then the parents can watch in their cars on a tablet. Maybe they create a Zoom meeting and have multiple cameras across the rink. You don't have to have a hardwired television. Everyone has their smartphone. And then even, the parent that doesn't drop them off at practice can watch too. So that's actually something that just occurred to me and I think would be a really good modification. And then I'm sorry, I forget your actual question.
Diligence in cleaning the gear. Some parents let that gear sit in the bag, and that's one of the reasons why hockey gets such a bad reputation for smelling horrible.
It's an aroma.
The stench of the bag.
It's an aroma.
Right.
Yeah.
Beloved by many, hated by others.
Oh,
yes.
my nose can't stand it anyway. So this is the year where you really got it. You really have to step it up when it comes to cleaning the gear.
Yes. So as an athletic trainer, that was always something that I was very strict with the players that I worked with, whether that was in undergrad with the Delaware hockey team, but also even my husband. We used to live in a small bedroom, a one-bedroom apartment, and I said, sure, you can start playing hockey, but I don't want to smell it. So whether that means you pay for a locker at the rink or, figure it out, but the smell is germs. So for me, it was just like, it's not safe for you to be like covered in these bacteria. So he actually got this little blow dryer with a tent around it that he can hang all of his gear at the end, and it dries it out, which keeps the bacteria from growing. But I would say we should always be super diligent about cleaning. And it's easy to just throw the stuff in the bag, zip it up, leave it in the garage and walk away. But also by cleaning it, it gives you an opportunity to inspect it. So is the glove torn a little bit? Is the padding broken? Then you need to replace the glove. Or, even the hockey helmet, as someone who's employed by a concussion center, you have to make sure that the helmet still fits and that it's in good condition and the padding isn't torn. So you can also see this extra step of having to clean everything as an opportunity to make sure that you are keeping the kids safe.
You just reminded me of a funny story. In my son's age, there's no goalies yet. So typically what they do is they bring the goalie gear in, and someone tries it every week. And I was talking to one of the administrators, like, yeah, I was thinking about bringing the goalie gear. I was like, I'm not putting my kid in that goalie equipment this year. You're crazy if it's going to go around. But, and again, this speaks to both of you. Those are those little tiny human oversights sometimes. He didn't mean anything by it. He wasn't trying to cause any problems. But it's like we didn't think about that. Of like, we can't have different kids wearing the same equipment each week. Again, another question, this kind of deals with organizations, but also parents as well. And it's for children's or families that have had the coronavirus and are through it. All right. What kind of precautions, again, this is kind of a broad answer, and I understand that. And I appreciate you both answering the best you can. If someone has had COVID-19, they've quarantined, they've gone through it, what is the safe return to play for that child? Now, and I want you to answer this both on obviously the child who has it, but also the parents and the rink that child's going to, because I could already see, like, why is he here if he had it, right? What is the correct plan for someone that has gone through COVID-19?
And that's a great question. And this is a source of confusion for a lot of people because, once someone has had it, it's kind of like the scarlet letter here, like it's okay, stay away. The reality is it's really more of an issue. And let's assume hopefully that person has very mild or no symptoms. I mean, that'd be
absolutely.
But it's more of an issue in terms of returning to play for the athletes that have been exposed than for whoever has had it. So to back up a little bit, if contact tracing is available, that is critical. So if someone on a team does have a positive test and they did play or practice with the team in the last few days, all of those players should quarantine.
Right.
And essentially by default, the family should as well. And the quarantine is going to, that's going to differ depend on the state, but you want to just try to limit, further exposure to other people. Once you've had it, there's very little evidence that after a positive test, and if someone has shown symptoms, even if they're mild, there's very little evidence that they are contagious after about 10 days. That's CDC, and that's now there's a fairly robust body of literature that supports that. People can still test positive well after that. There's reports of people testing positive for months,
right,
but they don't seem to be contagious. So what happens is most of the testing is this PCR type of testing. and it may pick up traces of dead virus. So that's why some people may be testing positive, despite no longer being contagious. But once there's a positive test, if you want to be very safe, wait 2 weeks. That's what we have in our protocol at the NWHL. And then after that, it's really not even about testing. I mean, that player is not contagious and they can return to play. And then depending on how bad the symptoms were, it would just depend on, did they have respiratory symptoms? If so, you'd want to ease them back into aerobic sports. Hockey is an anaerobic threshold sport, a lot of exertion. So, maybe a couple practices, they're just, they just skate a little bit. They get in there and they don't do some of the harder drills or scrimmages. And then after a week, if they're feeling up to it, they get back to playing. But again, it's the key is that people may not test positive, but have the virus and potentially be contagious. In fact, it appears that a lot of people are most contagious 1 to 2 days before they have symptoms.
Right.
So that's what makes this so complicated. Right. That it's all a guessing game.
It's scary.
It's a waiting game. So generally, if you've been exposed, you should wait 14 days and then get tested if possible. And if you've had it after 10 to 14 days, you really don't even need to get tested. You can return and you're not contagious.
Can you get it again, though?
Yeah, so there's a couple of anecdotal case reports of people having gotten it again. We also know that they've done some studies looking at antibodies, and antibodies do decrease fairly rapidly. So it seems like on average, people get from 2 to 4 months of antibody levels in their blood. We don't know if after that they could get it again, or if they retain some kind of immunity. So I can tell you personally, I did my own little experiment. I got COVID in February. I think I was probably patient 0. Fortunately got through it. And just out of curiosity, I got my antibodies tested periodically. And sure enough, I pretty much had them for about 4 months, and then they disappeared.
Wow.
So, now, do you still wear a mask, and do you still take all the precautions even though you've had it and you're basically immune to it? I mean, if our kids get it, can they 100%. Stop being,
Nobody is superhuman here. Absolutely wear masks. We don't know if maybe you don't get it, but you can still transmit it.
Right.
You can still act as a vector if, it may be in you and you could, breathe it out and infect somebody else. So
you could still shed the virus.
Yeah, there's no anti-kryptonite, unfortunately.
So I think the key here is that, I know people who said, well, if I get it, I won't get it again. And the answer, direct answer is there's nothing that we know 100% that that's true. And I think that's what people need to take out of this part of the conversation is if you get it, it does not guarantee that you're through this and you don't have to do anything. As Dr. Lomas said, you're not superhuman. We have not had the virus long enough to know the real science behind that to prove that. Something else I wanted to ask both of you about people that have had the virus, but also, when you're dealing with anything respiratory, we don't know, and we won't know for a long time, the long-term results of what happens if you have had this. I know there's different reports of people damaging their ability to do things with their lungs to nothing at all. But one thing I do want to ask about rinks is what should rinks do with people with pre-existing conditions, or to make sure that they're finding the right movements for someone that may have had this, has other pre-existing conditions from both a parental and, again, an organizational standpoint. I'm tripping over my words here. I apologize. As a rink, right, if you know a child has asthma, or if you're a parent and your child has asthma, is it as simple as just consulting your doctor to find the best way forward? Should rinks be recommending that if your child has a pre-existing condition, you should probably speak to a doctor? Is it that simple?
Right. Should you sit out the season if your child has an underlying health condition?
I think that's the perfect opportunity to consult with your physician.
Right.
There's different levels of asthma, and some people can tolerate a mask, some people can't. And it also is your own risk threshold. So that's a conversation that you would want to have with your physician, and also probably get the detailed reopening plan from your rink. Exactly what precautions are they taking? What's the reinforcement for any differing from the plan as far as cleaning and things like that. And really, with those pre-existing conditions, I don't know that the coach, I probably think it's inappropriate for the coach to be making any sort of decision on that.
Right.
But I think it's really the rink and or the coach could have a sit down conversation with the parent to say, first, did your physician get approval for this? Right. And then, really talk it out in a strategic way rather than just being like, yes or no, okay, you're in for the season, or, I know that you have X, so I don't want you in, because they're not medical professionals.
Right. Right. I think that's also a perfect transition to this question. And this is probably going to be more of a general discussion. But one of the things that I think is really important is really clear communication between rinks to organizations to the parents and back and forth. And I've seen some teams doing this phenomenally. I've seen other teams where the rink doesn't want to be involved. They don't want to talk. They just want you to follow the rules, which can be very frustrating at times. So the question is, what should parents do if they think a rink is not following the correct guidelines or a team is not following the direct guidelines? Because I think the first initial reaction is to just raise and this is not okay and we need to have a revolution. And I think that, would you agree, I'll kind of put this out there, that if you're an organization or rink, have clear guidelines for communication for different scenarios where there's someone has the virus, doesn't have the virus, pre-existing conditions, everything we've spoken about today. Or if again, this organization I spoke about a few minutes ago had no precautions in place. And I think the thing that's most shocking to me is not that someone got the virus and spread it. That seems obvious. It's that it doesn't sound like anybody spoke up and said, hey, maybe we should rethink this as a parent. I don't really want my kid with. So is that what is my suggestion? What everyone would recommend? Again, I'm pushing this as a question, is open the lines of communication, have that really clear dialogue between each other.
Yeah, Lee, it's really interesting. So we devised this protocol, right, for the NWHL. And we said, look, positive cases will be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Well, turns out no two cases have been alike.
Right.
Like, I'm talking about just the scenario, right? Like, one, it was this one type of exposure. The other one, the team practiced. They practiced. In one instance, it was the day after. In another, it was 2 days after. All of these permutations are infinite. Right. And so really what it comes down to is what you said, which is those open lines of communication. If you're a parent, you do want to take, and getting back to your previous question, it's sort of on you. Like, if your child does have an underlying medical condition, just make sure that you do your due diligence. Don't be as passive. Be more active about it. Seek out medical advice. Is it worthwhile? Are the risks worthwhile to have your kid play? And then if you're in an administrative position, if you're the president of a league, or if you manage a rink, then it is important for you to also make that decision. And now you have charges. I mean, those are all of the people that come to your rink. I think if you get that conversation going, you may not get 100% agreement, but you're going to end up with a pretty good plan, whatever it is. I mean, people may disagree about some of the minutia, locker room doors open or not, fans on or not, but overall, you're probably going to arrive at some conclusion that asks for mask wearing, asks for physical distancing, and limiting the density of players, in a given space. And I think that that's the best that we can do. So yes, I support the open lines of communication. And things will constantly be changing. I mean, this will not remain the same. In 3 months, it's going to look very different. We may or may not have a vaccine in a few months. I mean, that's going to be another issue, whether or not that gets mandated. And that's a whole other can of worms. But the point is, if you've got those open lines of communication, you will be able to handle those changes. You'll at least be able to arrive at some sort of agreement, or at a minimum threshold that everyone agrees to.
I have a question for I'm sure we're going to have a few refs listening in. So I have a question about the whistles, because we know the virus travels with droplets, and I'm thinking with a whistle, there's a lot of droplets that could form. What should they switch to electronic whistles?
There are hand crank whistles. Yeah, there's electronic versions. And again, it's those small asks. Why not? Like the real question is why wouldn't you?
Right.
Ultimately.
Yeah, there's we can all do our part in trying to minimize the virus as best we can. We can't control the virus. It's out there. It's spreading. But there are things that we can do to try and minimize the risk within our own families and with each other.
Right. I was going to joke
Simple
that
things.
It's a perfect time to bring in the electronic strike zone in baseball, but that's another podcast for another time.
There you go.
Dr. Lomas, you actually alluded to a question I have here. I actually want to read this as it's written because this is a hard question for anybody in both you and Julia's position, which is, what can we expect moving forward? But I wrote this, even if the answer is we shouldn't expect anything, because the truth is no one knows, right? But, in the positions that you're in, when I say what can we expect moving forward, I think what I'm really asking is what precautions should we have in mind moving forward? And again, I believe you're about to repeat what you've been saying the whole episode, which is a good thing. I want you to know that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think no one's got a 1 month or 3 month plan. I think this is, look, people may have said that they accurately predicted how this would progress. And I think they would be, they'd probably be a little disingenuous if they said that.
Right.
The reality is it's probably something somewhat mutable. There's some evidence, if we look at previous pandemics, that it may get, less virulent as time goes on. But we just, again, we don't know. And so I think for the time being, the two things to remember are it will pass. This too will pass. There will come a day, and yes, it feels like forever right now. But whether that's in 2022 or 2023, this will be in our rearview mirror. And I think that's just one way to kind of, give ourselves a little bit of encouragement. I mean, it's a lot of heavy plodding until then, but it will pass. This isn't the future of humanity, for the rest of our days on this planet. And the second thing is just what we talked about, be conservative right now with your approach. Try to set, unfortunately, this has become a bit of an ideological issue. Just try to set that aside for now. And
right.
you don't want to get anyone sick. You don't want to get sick. You don't want your kids to be sick. And so just err on the side of caution. This isn't the time to be a cowboy or a hero. It's not a sign of toughness to be, flouting regulations. Just do your part, and then before you know it, like I said earlier, it will be over. And but yeah, the best thing we can do is to decrease the harm currently.
Yeah, Julia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too before I jump into our final questions.
I think Dr. Lomas nailed it. And until it's passed, I would, expect things to continue to change as we learn more. I know that there was, when they started saying, yes, you should be wearing a face covering or a mask, there was a lot of like, well, last week you said you don't, right? But we're learning things as we go. And we really thought it was potentially through contact, right? So we were like bleaching everything that came home from the grocery store. And we learned now that, it's more through the air. So, things are changing as we're learning. So we do have to recognize that things are variable and be flexible with it as we learn more so that eventually it ends up in our rearview mirror.
Absolutely. It's funny. I always tell my friends to find anchors during this time. And by that, I mean, this is, between 1941 and 1945, there was a world war. At least we're not sending our kids overseas right now. Or during the last pandemic, there was a world war. We're not having to deal with that right now. Little things like that. But, what I hear from both of your answers there is a call for unity, a call for teamwork, that we are all in this together. That's something we heard a lot during the early days of this, but haven't heard a lot recently, to be honest with you, is that personal accountability. It's on us to work together with our families, with our teams, to make sure that we're doing the best we can for ourselves and each other. That's that unifying message that I don't think is out there enough personally right now, but I'm sending it now. I'll tell you both this too before I get to the final question. Never have I recorded a podcast or a show that I hope outdates itself faster than this one. I hope that very quickly none of this matters anymore, that nobody listens to this podcast because we found a vaccine and everybody's doing better. But before I turn to the final question, let me turn into the final question, excuse me. This is what I like to ask. What questions, if any, are Christie and I not asking as parents, as coaches, that we should be asking you two right now about the virus?
Well, Julie, you want to take that?
About the virus itself, I think you guys nailed it. This was really, really comprehensive.
Oh, thank you.
I think one part that people kind of can be overlooking is the psychological effect of this.
Right.
We were all locked down for a long time, and, even communicating through Zoom, everyone's kind of zoomed out, right? So the kids are on iPads all day or laptops all day at school, and the sports is a really good outlet for them. So, but just recognizing that, your child's going through something really difficult.
Good
Maybe
point.
less so if they're 3 or 5 and don't really know any different. But especially teenagers, this is already kind of like a very messy hormonal time. So,
Right.
And there's no predictability. School's virtual, then it's hybrid, and then it's back to virtual, and the rink's open, and then it's closed again. So just making sure that you're communicating with them and making sure that, they're well as humans and understand what's happening, and that they're given some sort of outlet. And I think that's really where the virtual practices come in. Even if it's just like a virtual check-in as a team.
Right.
You don't have to be doing physical activity together. A conference call, maybe you don't have screens on, because I've actually, I was talking to someone and they were saying, there's actually a lot of, it takes a lot of brain effort to be on a Zoom call. The sound's a little bit off from what's happening on the screen. Turns out you blink less often when you're looking at a screen, whether it be a television or an iPad, so you get eye strain. So it's good to kind of turn off the screen every once in a while, but really just check in with your child who is a human being and is struggling through this too, whether or not they're saying it, and just making sure that they have some sort of outlet.
Well,
Right. And even on the college level, there's a lot of heartbreak. I just read an essay by a SUNY student, and he wrote about the difficulty he's having because their season's been canceled. They've already canceled hockey in New York State for all the SUNY schools. And he's worked his whole life to get to where he is right now, to play hockey. He loves school, obviously, but hockey was a big part of his decision and where he chose to go to school. And now it's done. It's over with. And he's a senior and he's really wrestling with it. Just broke my heart when I read his essay that he put out there on social media. So even the older kids are having a tough time with this.
Yeah, I would just, I absolutely agree with that. And remember, as parents, we're also going through a tough time. So Julia said, check in with your kids, but you can't do as much for them as you want if you're also struggling. So it is something to just keep in mind and just be honest with yourself. And if you're struggling, try to get some help. This is unprecedented. I mean, that's the reality. And we just, we have to recognize that and be gentle with ourselves too.
Yeah, I read a great article, just to echo your point, both of your points. It was basically written as, you've held it together for 6 months and then someone spilled the milk and you lost your freaking mind. Yeah. And that's a telltale sign that maybe you're not where you thought you were. And I think, as you're saying, Dr. Lomas and Julia, it's about, you got to give yourself permission to realize you're going through this too. Like, we don't have any long-term studies as a nation of 8 months of quarantine and limited resources and toilet paper and all the fun things that have happened over the last 8 months. As you said, unprecedented. And sometimes it's important to take just a brief step back and say, hey, you know what? This is not normal, and that's okay. And, I'm a little stressed out. Before we close this out, I do want to ask this question too. Just what's a good place, resources people can go to get more information? Obviously, there's lots of different competing messages all over the place.
Yeah. So we're looking for good guidance that we can rely on, guidance based on science. Where should we go?
Yeah, well, so I would say, despite, I know there's been just issues in the last few months, but I still do think that the CDC is a good resource if parents want to just understand, what's the latest synthesis of the evidence that's out there, because it can be very complicated to weed through. I think many academic medical centers do have very good vetted, also, summaries of recommendations.
Right.
So, certainly at NYU, there's a lot of great information. The NYU Langone website gives a lot of good information about, recommendations relating to sports and returning to activity. Julia might know a little bit more about specific USA Hockey resources just because of her involvement with it. Do you want to take that, Julia?
Yeah. USA Hockey was actually one of the first sports organizations to put out a reopening plan. So kudos to USA Hockey for, really just preparing as soon as they had any sort of information so that rinks could, the organization could guide rinks in reopening and leagues. And there's another one called the Corey Stringer Institute. They're really big in science and sport. They do a lot of heat illness because Corey Stringer died from heat illness. But they have put out a good position statement that's been endorsed by a number of different medical organizations and sport organizations. So again, that's the Corey Stringer Institute. And the last one is a group that I've loved for years. It's called Sidelined USA. And they are, their kind of mission is to help students and athletes who have been, sidelined from sport, typically from a medical condition. Either their medical condition means they can't play that sport anymore that they love, or they can't play sports at all anymore. And they've put out a lot of resources for youth athletes who, everyone's been sidelined now. So it's kind of the angle is more mental health and how to stay engaged in athletics. So Sidelined USA is a great resource, although not quite about the virus. And then the NCAA has also been doing a bunch of podcasts. So that's another one that you guys could check out. Obviously, their resources are more college specific, but they also have a really good survey study on mental health and the student athletes. Because again, at this point, you just all through high school, all you can think about is going to college. It's finally get some independence. Some people pick the school based on participation in sports. And then you have the whole family dynamic of, are my family high risk? Are they working in frontline jobs? Now they lost income. Can I go back to school? There's so much happening.
Right.
So the NCAA is taking a really good look at that too. So Sidelined USA, NCAA, and then of course USA Hockey is fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing those resources. That's great. I never heard of the Sidelined. One. That one I'm going to check out for sure.
Yeah, it's a small group, and I talk about them whenever I can because I think that mission is so great.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we link them at the bottom of this episode, also on the webpage as well. Some non-agenda based resources for people to go find some information. Again, the fact that I hadn't heard of some of those, that's a big deal. That's why I asked the question. You don't know unless you ask. So before I close this out, is there anything else anybody wants to say? Any other final tips or trades or messages to the listeners?
Just stay positive, everybody. And as both of our guests have said, we're in this together. We're in the rowboat. We need to row the same direction, and stay positive and be that positivity for your kids too, because they feed off of you and they can pick up, if you're staying confident and positive, it's going to be better all around for your kids as well.
And if you're being cautious.
Cautious. Yes. Set the good example.
Model the behavior that you want them to
Great point.
have themselves.
And it's great that you guys are putting this out. We need more of this because I think you guys obviously have a big reach, and I think this is a good way to, again, sometimes the resources, it's just very confusing. And so sometimes kind of getting all of that, in one little snippet of time can be very clarifying for people.
Well, and we appreciate having you both on as well. I think that's a big part of this is getting that clarification and just reaching out and communicating and the things that we spoke about. And I do also want to echo that the thing that was echoed several times on this episode is that at a base minimum, mask wearing, social distancing. Dr. Lomas, as you said several times, it may be that easy. There's a lot of questions, a lot of answers, but those are two basic things that everybody can do. Dr. Lomas, Julia, I want to thank you both so much for being on this show today. It was a pleasure having you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Both are so great. Thank you so much. Huge help for us.
For Christy Casciano-Burns and myself, Lee Elias, this has been an episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you.